Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me in this wonderful interview with Neil Moore. I admire him so much. He's a great musician. He has a great vision, and he's the founder of Simply Music. Thank you so much, Neil, for coming to my podcast and sharing a little bit of your life with us who love creativity.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure, Gabriela. Really, it's a pleasure to have the opportunity to speak with you today.
Thank you, Neil. And taking advance that now we are in June for Father's Day, I would like to talk about how was your journey as a father with your kids and how you encourage the creativity in your kids and the tips that you give to all the parents that are listening.
Well, that's a great question. Um, well, my there's a couple of things that I need to say. First of all, the context of my children were born into a relationship where my wife and I first met when she had just turned 12 years old and I had just turned 13 years old. And so that was 18,463 days ago.
Wow.
So that was over 50 years ago. So my wife, I loved her from the moment that I met her. And we have a unusually high degree of satisfaction in our relationship and an extraordinary friendship and extraordinary compatibility. And it's a very, very easy relationship. And it's a relationship where we have not really found that we have to work at our relationship. It just seems to work. And uh, why I'm saying this in the context of your question about parenting is that my wife grew up in a household where her parents never fought or argued. They had a beautiful, loving relationship. And I grew up in a household where my parents were deeply in love. They had an extraordinary relationship. They never fought. They never argued. So both of us saw a beautiful, loving relationship between our parents. And they stayed in love until um, both of them died in my wife's case, and my mother is still alive. We also have a relationship where we don't fight, we don't argue, we've never fought, we've never had an argument. And I'm only saying that from the point of view of our children have grown up in a house where they've seen parents who just love each other, who laugh and are loving and polite and courteous and respectful and kind. And I think that just the blessing that is, I don't feel like I'm qualified to offer tips on that because we just feel as though we were brought
Yeah.
together, brought together, I think it was divine design. I don't care whether that's true or not. I just get value in believing that it's true. And we both feel that way. And we feel really privileged that we have the type of friendship and relationship that we have. And I also feel very grateful that that our children have grown up in a household where they've never experienced, fighting or arguing, and I feel that that has impacted their temperament. Um, you asked about their creativity, and this is a different conversation altogether, creativity, because that's an area that I have a great interest in. Um, as a founder of an organization whose focus is to contribute to causing a breakthrough in the creative capability of humanity, uh, I think that where we witness creativity at its best is in what role creativity plays in our lives individually. I'm of the view that this is a very unique time in human history. We are seeing the arrival of a technological tsunami.
Yes, I agree.
The impact that technology has had in the last 20 years is breathtaking. And yet, it's nothing compared to what's about to happen in the next 10 years. We are right in the trajectory of heading up the exponential curve of the breakthrough that technology will have, the speed of change, the extent of change, how dramatically it's going to affect our lives, and who we have to become in order to flourish in that future. I'm of the view that the critical personal attribute or skill or ability, whatever you want to call it, but the critical currency of the future will be creativity. And I think for both our children and teenagers and adults and elders, immersing ourselves in activities that impact our creative capability is one of the most important things we could possibly do. And so for me, fortunately, as a musician, I grew up in a household where music was being played and learned every day, and my children were born into a household where music was being taught and learned and practiced and played, and so they have been immersed in musicality as as the
Yes.
foundation of their lives. Now, my goal was never to have them become musicians. My three children live very creatively expressed lives. My son is a sommelier, but also works with me in the music industry. My middle son is also a professional musician, producer, and uh, orchestrator and engineer, works in LA. And my daughter is an editorial stylist. She lives in New York. What's most important to me with my children, the not the advice, but the mantra that I lived with and that I communicate to my children is, can you listen long enough and quietly enough to hear what you are being called to do, whatever that is? And whatever it is that you are being called to do, are you willing to follow the adventure in spite of whether it scares you or your fears or the unknown? Are you willing to follow the adventure of honoring your calling?
Very interesting.
And and that has been really important for me as a parent to communicate that to my children. And to this point of time, they are all doing that. The other thing is that, sorry, am I saying too much here?
No, no, no. Go ahead.
Um, the other thing for me is that I I never wanted to be a parent where my children grew up saying, "Oh, Dad, he was a really good man or a nice man," but I never really knew him. I I wanted to be a revealed parent. So I've always tried to be mindful of what's appropriate to their age and their level of understanding and maturity and wisdom at whatever age. But I've always tried to reveal myself, reveal what I believe my strengths are, what I believe my weaknesses are, the the victories or the successes that I'm having, the struggles or the problems that I'm having, and I'm grateful that now, having had the opportunity to parent for close to 40 years of parenting, with my children being 33, 35, and 37, I'm grateful that I revealed myself and talked to them about the difficulties and challenges of life as and when they were happening. I just never pretended that everything was fine and all is great and everything's good. So,
And that's very interesting what you mentioned because it has connection with entrepreneurship. Like the core that you put in your kids, in your children, whatever they want to be in their own business or entrepreneur or no, or whatever they choose, they have that strong um, critical decision of thinking that I'm convinced that is from the creativity. And that's why I always like to talk about this topic, because you just mentioned the technology, it's absorbing so much our society, and you just said it's coming more and more things.
Mm.
But also I would like to hear from you, what are the activities that you recommend? You mentioned like we have to emerge in activities that encourage that creativity. You mentioned an example that is the music.
Yes.
Other activities you suggest that we should do?
Yeah. Well, firstly, I stay in a fairly narrow lane, when it comes to creative activities. I personally do, and I think that anything where people are having the opportunity to recognize a problem or recognize an opportunity, our ability to do that comes out of our creative capability, where others look and may not see an opportunity. For us to be able to look at a situation and recognize an opportunity, that comes out of our creative ability. The ability to bring something into existence comes out of our creative capability, and the ability to resolve the problems and the hurdles and the breakdowns along the way also come out of our creativity. So for many people, life requires them that requires them to be creative, because we are recognizing opportunities, materializing opportunities, solving problems. So that in itself is a creative activity. It's not necessarily purely just artistic expression like dancing or painting or theater or music. I don't necessarily mean that. Oftentimes I think that our cultural definition of creativity is quite narrow. I know people that live in the sciences and in the field of mathematics, and for them that's profound creative expression. So
Yeah.
to be involved in anything that demands for you to think of different ways, different opportunities, different approaches, different methods, anything like that calls on us to be creative. And so if if that's a broad enough definition, what we can understand is that we're all being creative all the time, which is wonderful. Having said that, we're learning more and more about musicianship and its uniqueness. At the end of the day, creativity comes down to the the amount of connection that occurs in the wiring of our brains, of our neurology. The more connections we are, the more options we have. And so one of the things that we're learning about creative musicianship, not listening to music, but learning music, and learning music in a way that is aligned with the way that the brain is designed. I call that creative musicianship. What we're learning about creative musicianship is that it grows the brain uniquely, and it impacts the connectivity more than twice as much as any other form of art or theater or sport. And so I'm of the view that it would be extremely valuable for people to begin thinking of creative musicianship as critical neurological nutrition, to start to think of it as a nutrient. That this is an act, just like we may eat well, but we still understand the need to take supplements. Likewise, I think just as though we may have opportunities in our lives to express our creativity in lots of ways, there's still a need for us to have creativity supplements. And learning in a creative musicianship environment provides that nutrition uniquely. And that's my area of focus. And that's what I tend to, that's really the lane that I stay in. So I'm I'm imagining a world where just as every child grows, is born into a home where language is spoken, and eventually language emerges and the child is able to fully express themselves. I'm out for a world where children are born into an environment where music is being played and being learned, and that child develops musical self expression just as naturally as they do language. And we begin to create a world where everyone plays, because I believe that it's going to provide us with the creative framework that will allow us to truly flourish in the technological future that we're heading into. I know that was a long answer, and perhaps not providing as many tips as you'd like to, but that's the lane that I focus in: creative musicianship.
I love the way that you explain the musicianship.
Yeah, it's a
I,
mouthful, isn't it?
yeah,
Musicianship.
I like very much how you explain it, because um it's, for me it's a different way. I love music. I have heard a lot of music, about music, and I know to learn the notes, etc. But the way that you explain, uh that's the reason why the music is a general universal language that we can connect. And as you said, we can find different ways to connect each other. Even if you don't speak a language and you go to another country and you read the same notes as another musician, you are connecting, and then you are creating the music. It's
Yes,
amazing. It's,
yes, yeah.
I love the, I love that. And could you share with us a little bit about your Simply Music? What was the purpose that you create that? And we would
Yeah.
like to hear more about Simply
Yeah.
Music.
Mm. Well, there's a number of ways I can answer that. I'll tell you very quickly the genesis, because it helps to understand the method as a whole. From about the age of 3 or 4, I realized that I hear music and I see 2 and 3 dimensional shapes. That's not something that I worked at or something that I invented. It was just a part of who I was, almost as if it was, I arrived with that app installed inside of me, pre-installed, that this ability to just hear music and see it in terms of shapes and patterns. When I began studying piano at the age of 7 and my teacher would play, I could see those same shapes and patterns across the keyboard. I was learning piano.
Oh, interesting.
I developed my entire musicianship based on seeing music in terms of shapes and patterns. But I always thought that I was doing something wrong, because all my older brothers, who all of us, when we turned 7, there's 5 children in my family. My sisters studied something else, but the 4 boys studied piano. And as we began, turned 7, each of us began learning piano. I was the youngest, so I was the last one to start. Um, all of my brothers learned more traditionally. Really, in any country in the world where music is taught formally, the main approach is teaching what I call a reading-based approach. We're going to start by teaching you how to read music, how to read all the symbols and what they mean and where they go and how to interpret them on the instrument. I think that's a huge problem. And that's part of the reason why so few people actually learn how to play. But for me, I never learned that because I didn't need to. I found looking at the page to be unnecessary and intimidating. I could hear the music and I was able to see the shapes and patterns, and that's how I developed my musicianship. But I always thought I was doing something wrong because I wasn't learning the way that my brothers learned, or that I should have been, which was learning, a more theoretical approach and learning how to read, etc. And so there was always a certain degree of trauma. I didn't actually return to formal music studies until I was in my 30s. Always believed that I belonged to music, and I began teaching music, many decades ago, both teaching music and training teachers. After having studied formally, and I was teaching students that a traditional approach of how to read, I got a call one day from a government agency, and they asked me if I would teach this young 8-year-old boy how to play. He was blind. I just loved the opportunity of teaching him, but I wasn't sure how I was going to teach him because I only really knew how to teach a more traditional way. And it wasn't until then, for the first time, that it suddenly occurred to me, wait a minute, I never learned to read when I was a child. What was I actually doing? How was I learning all that music? And how was I learning to develop all of those songs when I wasn't reading? It was really the first time that I'd become consciously aware of what I was doing and started to look at it and bring language to it. And so I thought, wow, I bet I could show this young boy how to feel these shapes and patterns on the instrument. And so I began to show him this way, and he was making wonderful progress. I thought, well, he's making such progress because he's without sight. His ears must be very developed. But I said to his father one day, this boy had only had a few months of lessons and he was already playing a whole repertoire of music. I said to his father, are you happy with the progress? And his father said, not only are we happy with his progress, but he is teaching his 4-year-old sister how to play, and she's blind too.
Wow.
That was a life-changing moment for me. I didn't even realize fully what had happened. I just knew something very important had just happened. Wow, if I could show this 8-year-old boy who's blind how to play using shapes and patterns, and he can turn around and teach his 4-year-old sister how to play using shapes and patterns, and they're both playing so well, what would happen if I started showing all students this as a starting point? And as I began introducing these concepts, I saw a completely different results than anything I'd ever seen with students of all ages. I thought, well, I'm getting these results because this perspective is unique to me. I wonder if I could share it with other teachers and they could reproduce my results. And because I was already training teachers how to teach, as I began sharing these concepts, they came back saying, we haven't seen results like this before. And so I knew then that I must have something. So over the next 20 years, I developed it into a system of education, firstly, of how, an educational system, and then developed it into a system of training teachers how to teach using this system. And that really is what gave birth to Simply Music. And we now have teachers at 700, just over 700 locations across 12 countries. We also have, one of the things that's also very important to me is making world-class education available at no cost. Particularly, we currently have about 3.5 billion people online, but in the next 5 to 7 years, we'll see another 3.5 billion people coming online for the very first time. Many of these people from younger, developing nations. And I think it's going to be very important that we be able to offer world-class education at no cost. And not only to less developed nations, but also to drug and alcohol and rehabilitation clinics and penal institutions, marginalized communities, to everybody and anybody who otherwise couldn't afford world-class education. So one of the things that I also did a few years ago, I began developing a really rich and comprehensive foundation course, world-class, beautiful program, and I just offer that completely free. It's no upsell. There's no credit card, there's no gimmick to it. It's just world-class education at no cost. And we have a student community there now in that program across 128 countries. And so that's been a real privilege to be able to, make that available. And I'm very excited about our ability to be able to exponentially grow our community using this shape-based approach, because it's organic. The brain by design is a pattern-seeking device. And if we can stop teaching music theoretically and technically and mathematically and start to teach music from the way that the brain is designed in seeing shapes and patterns, the speed with which people are able to learn is immediate. Like, you start this week, you're playing next week, and not one finger, Mary Had a Little Lamb, but contemporary and classical and gospel and blues, and be composing and improvising and arranging and really playing music. So from the very, very beginning, you really experience how profoundly musical you are. All human beings without exception are profoundly musical. And this program gives people access to their natural musicianship more quickly than anything else we're aware of in the world.
Wow, that's amazing. That's a great impact that you are doing in the world. Do you have any Latin American country that you have your system, your teaching system?
We have self-study students through South America. but not teachers. And I'm really excited about the opportunity. I have no doubt that we'll have that opportunity to grow.
Maybe I should become a teacher music. I would love to.
Yes. Well, that's also one of the things that's remarkable about this program, because not only does it culturally redefine who's capable of learning music and how quickly they can learn, but it also completely redefines who's capable of teaching music. And just as a parent, we would never question our ability to teach our child how to speak. We would never question that. I believe the same reality is absolutely possible with music, that we have many of our students, children, who learn and go home and teach all their sisters and brothers how to play. Parents learn, teach their children. Children learn and teach their parents or their grandparents, or vice versa. That's the thing that's extraordinary about it. We can really open doors, musical doors, to everybody, and bring about this reality of a world where everyone plays, because all human beings are musical and we're a musical species. One thing I just want to add, if I may, Gabriela, why I hesitated in the very beginning when you asked me about how I created Simply Music. My hesitation was I get a lot of acknowledgement from people thanking me for creating the program, but I don't really feel like I created it. This was in me before I was even aware of my own existence. So once again, I feel like that was from a higher source than me. If anything, my role was probably, I have given a lot of my life towards materializing it and putting it into a form that's accessible to people. But I'm just the middle guy, not really the creator.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, thank God that we have you. So towards you, we can learn about this because, for example, I never learned piano. I never learned, but my daughter, she's 6 now, and she's learning piano, and I'm learning with her. Like everything that her teachers say, you have to practice this with her. I'm learning the piano, and so and one day I was like, wow, I would like to play with you. It's amazing,
That's
and
fantastic.
it's
Wonderful.
enjoyable.
Wonderful.
Now, what is now? Do you have any challenge in your entrepreneurial journey,
Oh, yeah.
and how did you how how you come
Yeah.
out of that?
Yeah. Uh, well, I'm around a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of them far more successful, that have much bigger organizations than I do. Uh, and when I look at every successful business owner or entrepreneur that I know, they can be very different personalities, but there's one thing that is the same for all of them, and that is that they didn't give up. When things looked like there was nowhere to go, they found somewhere to go. When they looked like they couldn't move forward, they found just how to take the next step. Now, I've had many times where all sorts of, breakdowns, and look, I've had a wonderful life, and in many respects, a very privileged life. But this has been a complex project. Coming over, I came to the United States with my wife, our 3 children, $5,000 to my name, and just an idea that I could make a contribution to the world. And giving birth to this has been the most difficult thing that I've done. For many years, I was working 18 to 20 hours a day, usually 360 days a year. I would take about 3 days a year off. There were years and years where we were just broke. I've gone through 3 complete financial wipeouts, 2 bankruptcies. We've had all sorts of initiatives collapse, and many times I've sat with my wife, really scared. I've shed plenty of tears. and I've had many, many, many sleepless nights worried about how we're going to make it through and not always knowing. But I kept going. And when it looked like it wasn't possible, I kept going. When it looked like there was nowhere else to go, I think that's sort of the secret for me. When you're going through hell, keep going.
Oh, Neil, your words are fantastic. Um, I'm pretty sure that what those words that you say, just keep going, it will help many entrepreneurs, including me, because all of us, we always have challenging things, but surround with great people like you and other entrepreneurs, and look, we will be there. Will be there. Um,
Well, I mean, look, smaller projects have smaller problems. But if you're someone that wants to take on something big, you're going to get into the ring with big problems. And big problems know how to hit you hard, really hard.
yeah,
So, it's not so much, we say this, it's not so much about getting knocked down. It's, are you willing to get up again?
and more strong and more smart.
Oh, look, I think I'm a world leader at making mistakes. I'm arrogant enough. Once I've made a mistake, I can't believe I made that mistake, and I can't believe that happened. I'm going to make that mistake again just to see if the same outcome happens. I'm a slow learner. Honestly,
Me too.
I'm arrogant and thick-headed, and sometimes that's I see that I'm very much part of the problem there. So you know, plenty of problems on my own design. Even running this organization, I've never built anything like this of this size before. I'm constantly out of my depth, constantly. I'm always up against who on earth do I have to become now in order to do what's needed of me. I'm running an international organization. I've never done that before. I don't think I'm very good at it either, to be honest. Probably shouldn't be doing that side of it. In many ways, I think I'm the bottleneck, but I've been able to stay with it and bring something wonderful into existence that contributes to people's experience of themselves and touches their hearts. And I thank God for the opportunity to have been used that way for the good of others. It's a blessing.
Yes, that's true. Blessing. Thank you so much, Nell, for wonderful um, words and for sharing your life with us, for sharing your knowledge and a little bit of you or your project. And I'm I wish that many Latina moms, many Latin American countries start approaching that system that you have for kids, much needed in our countries, that will help future generations to develop the creativity and things that we need. Our countries are rich in nature and culture and everything, and that's why for me it's very important, um, creativity in many aspects in the life,
Yeah.
including entrepreneurship, because I see many designers or artisans struggling. Um, they are very talented. They have wonderful techniques, and for years, and our ancestors, everything. But there is just one thing that it will change. It will change communities and the economy of communities.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you, Neil. And any few words that you want to share with us?
I feel like I say too much oftentimes, but thank you for the opportunity to speak to everyone. And I would just ask that people look for any way and means that is available to them to immerse themselves and their children in creative self-expression, because nothing's going to prepare them for dealing with the new future that's arriving more so than creativity. So
Thank you. And the family is the núcleo. Well, in Spanish we say la familia es el núcleo de la sociedad. In English, it's going to be something like the center of the society is the family. And happy Father's Day. Mel, I'm sure that you will enjoy that day with all your family. And I wish happy Father's Day to all the dads
yeah,
around the world, and also the moms that are
yes,
taking that model of parent or father.
exactly.
Thank you to all of you, and see you in my next podcast. Thank you.